It's great to have old friends on this show, and while he's not old, I am, and it's been a long time. Joe's been in baseball, pro ball, since the mid-'70s. We met, 69? We met when I worked for the New York Mets back in the mid-'80s. Joe was part of a tremendous front office that I was fortunate enough to work with. Baltimore's own Frank Cashin was in charge there. Al Harrison and Joe McIlvaine were the people who put together some of the best years, probably the best years the Mets have ever had in the mid-'80s. So Joe's a good friend. Great to see you again, and thanks for coming on. And as we do here on our Hitting the Books, you're going to do two because that's who you are. Ask you the simple question, favorite book and why?
Two. One baseball book was Pitching to Win by Bob Feller. When I was young, I wanted to be a pitcher, but we didn't have anybody that did instruction or anything like that. So I got Bob Feller's book, Pitching to Win, complete with hand-drawn illustrations of seams of baseballs, where to put your fingers, how to throw a curveball, how to throw a fastball. And I learned from that, and I was self-taught as a pitcher, and it got me into professional baseball because we never really had any coaching. And the other one would be, I think, Animal Farm, because I find myself using that quite a bit even in baseball today, because the high school teacher I had in high school talked about the levels of abstraction. And Animal Farm was the perfect example of that with the pigs, and all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. And and we talked about the levels of abstraction is when you read a book, you can read it on the surface, like a fan sees a baseball game a lot of time on the surface, what's happening. But when you begin to understand more, you dig a little deeper, and you understand why the manager's doing this, and you go a little deeper, and it allows you to do that. And I think I learned that from Animal Farm, in that sense, that just to look below the surface, find out what the author is really trying to tell you.
Now, did that come from the teacher to get you to that point of doing that, or did you do that yourself in just reading the book?
I think it came a combination of the two. I think, at 17, your mind is a little different than it is at whatever age we are now, whatever that is. But I think you need help on that to point out things and the symbolism and why this person represents this and what this person represents here, and why you can start to read more into their character. And I thought you just read books to read books at that time. But then you begin to realize, hey, you can go below the surface. You can get deeper. You can find out what motivates people. And we do the same thing in life, and we do it with baseball players all the time. We're trying to get below their surface and find out what makes them tick.
I'm going to take you back to the first one, the Bob Feller book. One of the things I've thought throughout the time of my life in playing sports or being involved in it, there really are very few times where you're actually taught the essentials, how to hold a football to throw it, how to hold a baseball for a two-seam or a four-seam, how to hold a bat correctly. It's amazing, but that's not taught very often.
Well, I think as a result of that, what we try to do in professional baseball is when we get players, you bring them in and you start them all on the same thing, all right, and you find out what they know and how they do it. But the best hand is still hands-on teaching. Hold the ball like this. How do you hold your fastball? How do you hold your curveball? How do you hold the bat when you're up there? What are you trying to do? Do you make any adjustments? Do you choke up at all? Why? And you're trying to get them to tell you and find out how much maybe instruction or lack thereof that they've had. Because a lot of players are just so naturally talented. They just pick up a bat and swing it, and maybe they played other sports as well, and they're still learning. But you've got to help that process along by telling them the whys. Here's why you would want to do it this way. You're the type hitter that maybe should think about this. And that's what teaching's all about. And the better staff you have in the minor leagues along the way, because there's still a lot of teaching that goes on in the big leagues, obviously. Yeah. But you can expedite the progress of a player getting to the big leagues by these little hints and things. And a lot of if you ask the major league players, most of them will tell you, the most influential teacher I had was somebody maybe in the minor leagues. He was my manager, he was my coach, he was my pitching coach that showed me this or showed me that. Or sometimes it's a fellow player. He taught me how to throw a better slider, whatever it might be.
All right. Joe, that's great. All right, Bob Feller, baseball book. I would recommend that just on the fact there are diagrams in there that show you how to hold a baseball. And Animal Farm, which has been one of the all-time reviewed books and considered one of the great pieces of American literature. Joe McIlvaine, great to see you. Thanks very much.
My pleasure, Gary. Anytime.